And now it's going.
Welcome to Module 9 of Intro to Ethics, and we will be looking at deontology. So for the next module, if you could look at the following terms: deontology, absolute and positive duty, prima facie duty, negative duty, a priori proposition, hypothetical and categorical imperatives. We'll be reviewing goodwill, as well as the concepts of justice, fidelity, reparation, distributive justice, primary social goods, and retributive justice. An overall view of deontology can be found, and this is reordering the way in which these are shown in the book, beginning foundationally with duty as the basis of morality. Then the moral community consisting of all rational beings. Those rational beings being persons who cannot be used as a means only, because those persons have reason, and reason is important in discerning and applying moral principles. And those moral principles are not particular, but are universal. So we go from the foundational duty to the universality of morality. The word deontology, the Greek meaning duty, that which is obligatory, looks at moral duties, which, as was previously stated, are transcultural and universally binding. Now, Immanuel Kant, the Enlightenment philosopher most associated with deontology, is both similar to the ancient philosopher Plato and also has certain emphases in common with John Stuart Mill. Immanuel Kant and Plato both looked at formal principles, so lacking a specific content, but acknowledging that there might be disagreement. Accepting that where there is disagreement, there can still be a formal agreement at the conceptual level. Immanuel Kant and John Stuart Mill will emphasize autonomy and individual integrity. Kant in his deontology or Kantian ethics, Mill in the utilitarianism that he will slightly modify from its original incarnation as seen with Jeremy Bentham. And Kant and Mill are a little different than the ancients Plato and Aristotle, because Aristotle and Plato were more concerned with the public sphere as a whole rather than individual integrity in particular. Logic plays a role in Kantian ethics. So this slide is meant to lead into the deontology analogy of the following slide. Deductive logic sets out to deduce central categories. Its hypothetical is the if-then statement. If something happens, then something results. The premises lead to a conclusion. Positive premises looking at something that happens, negative premises looking at something that does not happen. Positive premises can be found within the hypothetical context. Negative are found outside of the hypothetical context. And the categorical conclusion is a result that happens if the conditions are met. But this is more concerned with preconditions than with the post consequences. And deductive logic and deontology are more about the preconditions or the concepts. Deontology itself tries to deduce moral categories. It has a hypothetical imperative. If we desire a result, then we ought to do something. Focusing in on that if, focusing in on that conceptual basis. Duty leads to moral action. And you can have positive duties and negative duties. Positive duties, something that is actively done or should be done. found within the hypothetical context. Negative duty, something that is not or should not be done, found outside the hypothetical context. The categorical imperative is an action that should happen and always be followed. Kant's view is, as I said, more concerned with the conceptual preconditions than the consequences. So it's not a consequentialism like utilitarianism, but it's more formal in terms of focusing on the preordained concepts. Kant's imperatives there are two parts to the categorical imperative. The first part, act only on that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. So whatever you do, think of everybody doing. Would it still work? That is really the first formulation of the categorical imperative. Secondly, you want to treat others. Here he says, so act as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in someone else, that in every case they're treated as an end in itself and never as a means only. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't have some instrumentality in how we treat others, but we should never only treat them as a means. We have rationality, they have rationality. We must see that all of us have an end in ourselves that we must respect. Kant gives an example of this with truth and its opposite, lying. He sees truth as an absolute duty. He feels that we all have an absolute duty always to tell the truth. Now, an absolute duty is something that is always binding, regardless of the circumstances. So the 3 points here will be reflected in the following slide analogously when we look at a prima facie duty. But truth as an absolute duty, according to Kant, can be summarized as follows. 1. Is lying about a promise a universally valid law or not? That is the beginning question. Kant gives it a test of universal validity. This would correspond to his first categorical imperative. If everyone can lie, and by extension does lie, then nobody can make promises. If you make a promise, then you tell the truth, but a lie does not tell the truth. Therefore, a lie does not make a promise. It's using a form of logic there, seeing that since promises need truth, the universality of lying negates the telling of truth. Now, the third point here, if one applies the lying promises maxim to themselves and others, you actually annul the promises itself. Not only is everyone else lying, if you lie, if everyone's lying, you really can't trust anybody. Ever. It seems very strict, it seems very formal, but this is Kant's look at the absolute duty of telling the truth, because allowing for false promises at the universal level negates the ability to trust anything anybody says. Now, Cicely Bach has the prima facie duty. A prima facie duty is different because it's not an absolute. It may be morally binding depending on the circumstances. So it's more circumstantial. These 3 are meant to echo what was seen previously in the absolute duty of Kant. So 1, are there any workable alternatives? Are there alternative circumstances? 2, there's a test of publicity, which kind of connects with the universality of the categorical imperative first formulation. Would a reasonable person accept what is happening? The telling of a truth, or say the telling of what might be termed a white lie. And then third, which looks at the second formulation of the categorical imperative. Would someone like to be lied to? So not in terms of telling the truth, but who the truth is being, or in this case, the lie is being told to. So one, are there workable alternatives? You give it a test of publicity rather than universality, and then you think about how it impacts yourself. So in that case, it looks at not treating others as a means only, but yourself as a means. Lastly, we have a look at past, present, and future. According to Ross's 7 prima facie duties and John Rawls, the duty of justice. From top to bottom, we have past, present, and future. Looking at Ross first, past duties would be based upon past obligations. And the 3 prima facie duties that seem to go along with past obligations for Ross would be reparation, fidelity, and gratitude. So reparation, trying to make up for past harms. Fidelity, staying true to past promises. Gratitude, staying faithful to past services. The present looks at the duties that are going on and will be ongoing in the immediate future. So self-improvement and justice would be present ongoing duties, the duty to improve ourselves and the duty to give others equal consideration. And lastly, future-looking duties, beneficence and maleficence, to do good to others, to benefit them, or to do harm to others. What are you going to do? So past, present, and future. Now with Rawls, we have retributive justice, which looks at punishing past harms. It's a promise to be proportionate based upon what was done, and judicial in terms of upholding the public service. Distributive justice is more of a present case of you are giving out social goods, giving people the ability to pursue access to social goods, as well as equal rights and basic liberties. So these two seem to connect with the present ongoing duties from Ross's prima facie duties of self-improvement and justice. And then lastly, with the theory of justice and the veil of ignorance that is to be transcended, you have a theory of justice in which you do treat people in the future in this way, and there's the veil of ignorance that must be overcome, so you do not treat people this way in the future. So Ross's 7 prima facie duties, John Rawls, the duty of justice, looking at them in kind of the 3-2-2 schema of past, present, and future. So that is a brief look at what we will be focusing on in Module 9 with Immanuel Kant and how utilizing the categorical imperative and likewise hypothetical imperative, justice can be seen as a conceptual, ethical duty. And in this way, Kant gives one of the main parameters of how we can conceptualize ethics, and in doing so, gives one of the most enduring of the modern ethical philosophies with his Kantian ethics of duty.